I
Welcome to Cardone Debates. We have packed stage today. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and Happy Hanukkah, all of that. Gary will not be joining. He's feeling under the weather, unfortunately. So we will be carrying this in without him today. But Gary, we hope that you feel better, and we're missing you already.
Yep.
So
Merry Christmas to everyone. Happy holidays. Nice to meet all of you.
Likewise. Cardone Debates without the Cardone.
yeah, well, Grant should be joining. He usually likes to make his appearance a bit late. So he might be jumping in here. What, Dustin?
Not late, fashionable, right?
Yes. Yeah. Everybody here likes to be fashionable.
Well, so Merry Christmas, everybody. Gary, hope he feels better. My God, sick. Listen, I think we have a very interesting panel tonight. We're going to go, I don't know if it's going to be completely like this where we're going like full on debate one or the other, but crypto's bleeding. Anyone who's in crypto knows that, oh my God, it's all over. And so we brought on a good mix of Bitcoiners and real estate people, including my friend, regular guest of the show, Jerry Katz is here. Jerry, how you doing, brother?
Good. Thanks for having. Always a pleasure. Right?
So you still got your Bitcoin, or are you just all real estate now?
No. I even got the HODL, HODL. It's an ETF. I got some micro strategies left after that debacle. But I sold 66% over 400. It's called structure to create real wealth, right? And diversification. No, but I've got my Bitcoin. I got my real estate. I got strategy for real wealth, not just look rich. I'll leave it with that.
Love it. Rom, welcome.
Thank you.
How do you, okay, we're coming into a new year. Where are you? Bitcoin, real estate, both, a mix. Where are you going?
Kind of on the edge of real estate and tokenization. We're basically, developing a sustainable community in the Bahamas, and we're going to completely do it resilient, everything off grid, and we're tokenizing the real estate. So we believe that's the future of all real estate transactions for, obvious reasons, for speed of and transparency of the blockchain. And also, as it adapts into, non-fiat related transactions, I think that's the future of all AI because nothing else can keep up with it, to be honest. So we're all in on that. We're actually getting some interest in data centers that are privately held. We have one that potentially could be going in the Bahamas, and we will back all those private AI investors in that data center and then surround our communities around that concept, including, robotics, AI, intelligence, medical wellness, and also pharmaceutical grade 3D printing. So I think, AI is here to stay. Bitcoin's here to stay. The stable coins that are going to make it through this rough patch are going to be here to stay. But, you got a lot of shit coins, unfortunately, that try to muck up the market and say they can't do things, and they don't prove themselves, and that's where we're at. And it's also the big players, right? Trying to weed out and take advantage of a lower market value of Bitcoin. So that's my perspective.
Ron's a pretty talented architect. He built Tony Robbins' house. We worked on a project together in Sedona. He has some really cool, super cool stuff.
So we're involved with really healthy buildings, efficient buildings. One of the things we've just developed is kind of a really efficient data center footprint where we can take, let's say, an 1,100 acre site and reduce it down to 200 acres. So we're into like maximizing efficiency for buildings and productivity. So I work with a group out of LA, some AI. They're like a AI lab, and they basically do some really interesting stuff with different technologies like the latest GPS, energy, power, all kinds of things. So it's a great time to be living. I say it's very exciting.
Cool, Ran. CJ, thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
How have you been lately? Can you give an update for everyone and a rundown on what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm CJ Constantinos. I am building People's Reserve. Our thesis is that Bitcoin is pristine collateral, and it has this magic quality where over the long period of time, its compounding annual growth rate transforms what in traditional credit markets, what we call duration risk into duration benefit. So taking that concept and building products like Bitcoin powered mortgages and Bitcoin bonds is really what we specialize in. And we're really excited to finally be opening our doors at the end of Q1 of next year.
Awesome.
Super cool. Cool. And Joe, what about you?
Yeah, for sure. So nice to meet you guys. For everybody watching the stream, I just retweeted it as well. So hopefully some of my viewers are tuning in. What I do is kind of adjacent to what CJ does at the crossroads of the Bitcoin and real estate space. We're building Horizon, which is a company that helps homeowners convert their home equity into Bitcoin. We're so far live in 18 US states, working on further expansion to some of the other major states, Texas included. And we help medium to high income homeowners, a lot of high net worth individuals too, efficiently convert their home equity into Bitcoin. Now, obviously, the general thesis there is that over multi-year timeframes, in the same way that CJ just highlighted, Bitcoin's compound annual growth rate tends to far and away exceed that of residential property. And so we're helping homeowners capitalize on that by moving a portion of their home's equity that may be doing 5-6% a year into an asset that over the last 5 years has done 60%, over the last 10 years has done 70% annually. So that's what we're working on now. And we're really excited about it as we head into the new year.
Wait a second. Compounding annual growth rate. That's what, so it's not a kegger like I did at the
No. But different spelling.
Man, it's so that's the thing I loved about Bitcoin. Like,
it's also, the kegger is also much less difficult to do than a kegger. I think past a certain age, it's tough to get up on your hands and do one of the handstand keggers. So,
a kegger, a kegger stand.
So the people closest to the printing machine, right? They get to suck the tap and get all the liquidity coming out of the machine. They're the cantillionaires, right? And I guess you can compare kegger to kegger because it is the liquidity tap for the everyday person. We feel when you use Bitcoin as a pristine collateral, which, by the way, it's better than gold ever was as collateral because it can be settled universally in 10 minutes with absolutely no other concerns. And by the way, you can't expand the supply like we see the U.S. government doing with the current form of pristine collateral that we have in U.S. treasuries. So this is the everyday chance to do a kegger as an everyday regular person and tap the liquidity of the Bitcoin engine to take dollar denominated debt and watch the burden of that debt shrink over time.
Look at you, CJ. You're the king of metaphors. Way to bring that back around.
Right. Hey, don't forget the hangover and the high at the same time, right? The volatility.
Well, so what's interesting, and Joe and CJ, what I've found fascinating, particularly the maturation of Bitcoin has allowed for the creation of these like very new, unique financial products. I've spoken with the governments of several countries about issuing Bit bonds and Bitcoin-backed like financial products, treasury products. How much do you think, right? And I wish Grant was here because I know that Grant has recently leaned very heavily into backing a percentage of his real estate deals with Bitcoin so that you get that cross-pollination. How much do you think in the coming year we see these new financial products become more and more ubiquitous for like regular people? Like where do we get to the point that people are backing at least part of their mortgages, or as Joe pointed out, like putting some of their home equity into Bitcoin, when does that just become a part of the process? Jerry, you're shaking your head. What do you think?
24, 36 months if we're lucky. We're too early for that. It's not going to go that mainstream yet, right? First Wall Street took over, right? We had this discussion in the room a little bit before we went live. Until they take out the legacy players, which is, our boy Mr. Saylor, I have a feeling that's going on right now if he gets delisted and all that good stuff. But what we've seen since the last debate that we were on here is obviously I'm an ex-Wall Street guy and I'm a real estate guy and I love Bitcoin and I love gold and I love precious metals, all that good stuff, right? I love assets. But I think they got to take out the legacy players. And I don't think Saylor's going to go away so easy, right? They did it with, Sam, FTX. They did it with all the underground. Now, like I said, Bitcoin's going Wall Street. It's in control by Blackstone and all these guys. And he's the last legacy player. Now the billionaires are involved. Every hedge fund's involved. Private equity's involved. I'm 100% behind it because they're behind it, right? Now you have governments involved. But I still think they're going to try to take out the legacy players. And the last big boy who owns 2,000 Bitcoin is Michael Saylor. And they're going for him for next.
He owns 650,000 Bitcoin.
Oh, shit.
Just a little more.
I'm sorry. 200. It's what's the stat? They say 200 billion. Is that what it is?
Something like that.
Yeah. 200 billion. That's where I was referring. But I think personally, I did on my Instagram channel, I did like a 4-minute thing. I'm like, what's going on? Witkoff, Trump, stable coins, right? Sovereign backed securities, right? T-bills backing. I definitely see who's taking control of Bitcoin. I definitely believe in it for the future. And I think the next 10-year run is not going to be tech stocks. It's not going to look like the NASDAQ. It's not going to look like the dot-com bubble. It's not going to look like the mortgages that caused the global financial crisis. It's going to be done on the rails of the blockchain. And I think the billionaires are stepping in now, right? And because they always signal, they don't tell. And once it hits the news, it's too late. But I think the last guy on their list is Saylor. And he's either got to join them, right? Just like Modani did with Trump in his office, right? Otherwise, that's going to hold up things for a little while.
So,
there's also the argument of, he could be partnering with these banks. Fong Li did a podcast with Natalie Brunell today. I didn't get a chance to see that, but I know one of the questions that she asked was, will Strategy become a Bitcoin bank? So creating different types of financial instruments for different people, retail investors and institutional investors alike. He's met with JP Morgan this month. He also met with Morgan Stanley. He posted photos at both of those buildings. And so given the amount of Bitcoin that they hold, 650,000, they're one of the largest single holders. If you compare them to BlackRock, they're very similar. I think the Bitcoin ETFs, the spot-based ones in the United States, own well over 1 million Bitcoin at this point. I think rather than some kind of combative relationship between MicroStrategy and the incumbent banks, I think a far more fruitful relationship would be partnering with Strategy in order to create Bitcoin-backed vehicles. You've already seen Strategy do this in their own right with their suite of preferred stocks. But I think with the amount of capital that's held up at these banks, the power that these banks have, I think it really behooves them to take that Bitcoin expertise and that massive balance sheet that's available at Strategy, partner with them to create these types of vehicles and instruments. But I do agree with you, Jerry. It's going to be years off, right, in terms of development of these things. But the groundwork is being laid now, which is what's extremely encouraging to me. You've seen investor appetite for Strategy's suite of preferred stocks. JP Morgan is trying to do something similar. At the very least, they're floating a trial balloon for creating some kind of Bitcoin-backed structured note or IBIT-backed structured note. JP Morgan released that prospectus earlier this month. Morgan Stanley released a prospectus for a similar IBIT structure note in November or October, I believe. And so very clearly, they're dipping their toe in the water of these Bitcoin-backed financial instruments. And for me, it's all really encouraging. But I do agree, we're several months, if not years, away from this becoming very mainstream, as in being able to go to your bank and purchase Bitcoin or purchase some type of Bitcoin-backed fixed income vehicle or something like that. But for the time being, you're seeing with Strategy, you're seeing with what CJ's building, you're seeing with what we're building at Horizon. it's still a question of banks' willingness to underwrite Bitcoin as collateral. And I know CJ is a pretty big expert on this topic, why he views Bitcoin as pristine collateral, better collateral than real estate. I think a really big telltale sign of the development of or the advancement of Bitcoin in the zeitgeist as far as Wall Street is concerned was JP Morgan floating the idea earlier this year of accepting Bitcoin as collateral, which is massive. Previously, that was something that was unheard of. I think if you said that a couple of years ago, people would have thought you were crazy. And so it begs the question, 2-3 years from now, what's going to be out there that we're expecting, that we're looking out and saying is crazy today, So
that was really well said, Joe. I'd like to piggyback you and kind of answer Dustin's question and just tap on what Jerry was saying, because I think Jerry makes a good point. There's obviously different players in the system that are going to become a target. I wouldn't really necessarily call Saylor legacy. I mean, he was calling Bitcoin a scam that was going to go to zero back when I was first buying it. So he's kind of late to the game as far as what I would consider legacy. He's probably one of the first big players of Wall Street to actually enter into the game versus being a legacy player. But that's just semantics. But I think to answer Dustin's question and piggyback on what Joe was saying with what's happening right now in the marketplace with the bank's understanding of Bitcoin as collateral, it's a whole different world. Like when I first came up with People's Reserve, I literally was laughed out of offices and didn't even get meetings. Like in The Big Short, oh, you didn't know you need 400 million for your ISDA? Well, you're not even having this meeting, bro. Like, you don't even you show up, you don't even get the meeting. Now I'm booked and people want to learn more about Bitcoin as pristine collateral. And some exciting news I can share, Jerry, about how I think Bitcoin plays a role in real estate through these different products. Actually, just last week, People's Reserve, it's official. We have a patent pending Bitcoin mortgage insurance. And the Bitcoin mortgage insurance works just like a private mortgage insurance, except there's 2 upgrades. And the upgrade for the borrower is that when you make payments into the BMI versus the PMI, you actually build equity. Whereas in the PMI, you're only really getting the financing, and it's there to reduce the risk for the financier. But for the lender's perspective, you have the BMI escrow account holding the Bitcoin, accumulating the Bitcoin as the borrower makes payments, growing in value, which reduces risk of the loan. But here's the kicker. It's a 50-50 split on the BMI escrow account. So if we can maintain a 60% compounding annual growth rate, a 30-year mortgage will actually be paid off in full within 10 years. And then with a 50-50 split, the lender is not dealing with prepayment issues because they're actually getting paid more with their 50% of the BMI escrow account equity than they would have earned in interest over the 30-year period. So it's different products like this that plug into these models that are really going to solve real world problems like the housing affordability crisis. So if someone can utilize BMI and pay off a 30-year loan in 10 years because of an innovation, that's a pretty valuable solution. And I think that's what's going to help accelerate the entire marketplace and its integration into traditional finance.
Try to tell that to Mrs. Smith in Minnesota. I don't think she'll ever understand what you just said.
And she doesn't have with an app like
and PMI. Yeah, let me underwrite mortgages all day long, and then because people only can come up with 2% down, let me ensure that they can pay their mortgages. Right? PMI is shit. I'm in the insurance business, right? We don't insure mortgages. When Grant Cardone underwrites and a bank underwrites, or Fannie and Freddie, we go off of DSCR rates, right? PMI is just another financial product created by Wall Street to suck the money out of the country, right? And that's why we have a renter's nation. And listen, I agree with what you're saying, but they could have done the same thing with gold since the 40s, and they never did. So I'm a big, we've never met before. Justin's, a couple of us all know each other here, but I see what's behind everything, right? And it's all about money, power, billionaires, right? A renter's nation, who's in control, all of these things, right? So I love what you're saying, and I completely understand the model and why you're doing it and everything. But reality is pioneers, right, who go for gold, right, they usually lose, right? But the people that sell the shovels, the Levi's, they make money, right? And those are the Blackstones, the BlackRocks, everything. So if we go back to MicroStrategy, look at the price of the stock, right? I'll give Saylor credit. He was the first to the party. He was. I listened to him for hours on YouTube, him and Dustin, right? back in the day. Even BitBoy, look where he is, right? So he was first to the party, but the billionaires, they're going to take his drink, his girl, and his fucking chair. And that's exactly what's happening today. He turned MicroStrategy into a NASDAQ Bitcoin vault. But today, BlackRock's in control, right? ETFs, liquidity, lobbyists, they're going to compliance that guy to death. And if you watch him on the interviews, does he look good to you? His face? They're going to compliance him to death. And there's a reason for it, because I call him from the underground Bitcoin world, right? And I don't know. And I think that's going to hold that whole thing up. And we've talked about this before. I came from the .com industry, right? I was selling Webvan, right, on a 56K modem with no cell phones. And the stock went from 2 to 140. It's Grubhub today. The technology was 20 years away today, 30 years away. So I think until we get through the legendary players, the legacy players, all these old stuff, until Wall Street's fully in control and institutions, that's going to be your biggest barrier to entry. I'm sorry to. So that's what I think what's going on.
And Rom, I'll let you get this, but one of the things that Jerry said that I was surprised that our esteemed panelists didn't jump all over. So what's really interesting with Saylor in particular is we had the announcement, was it yesterday, or at least within the last couple of days, about adding USD to the balance sheet, which felt like a defensive maneuver. So in some ways, I feel like it lends to Jerry's theory that what we're witnessing is like a targeting specifically of Master and Saylor, which is why you would come out and announce that you've got USD reserves on the balance sheet to be able to weather whatever storm may be coming. Right. So, but I'm not so sure that Saylor and Master are in any danger of being hunted down. Like I don't see the place that it becomes insolvent, but always open to being that. Is there, so that, Rom, I'll kick it to you, and I'd love to get everybody's opinion. Is there a number that Bitcoin drops to that Master suddenly becomes insolvent and goes under?
Stock price.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, Saylor is in a different position because of his strategy, right? Because he's built this a ledger, if you will, for the use of Bitcoin, right? So they're not going to deny him that. He's put a lot of money into that infrastructure. So I'm wondering if they're just trying to buy in at the lowest point they can get in. And I think that's what they're doing now. They're not going to, I don't think they'll bury him, but, you know, they might set, they're putting pressure on him for sure. But I think, you know, he's in a great position. You may not call him a godfather, but he did invest in, you know, Ledger, which was like the first guys putting a bunch of money in a transactional tool that we can actually use Bitcoin every day, you know? So that's my thought on it. I mean, I like the guy. I think he's, you know, he might get buried, but I don't think so. He's a pretty smart guy. So I don't, even though BlackRock and those guys have been around a long time and they know how to screw the thumbnails, you know, but and it's tough, you know, because when you get to be a big boy, you have to, you know, go in the tall weeds, you know.
So I love Saylor twice about digital credit and Bitcoin powered finance. And if I had to take a guess on what he's doing, I would say what he's really trying to do is increase his credit quality and credit score. So his credit rating is not at the level where it needs to be to get into the really big institutional pools of capital that are looking for highly rated products. And when it's only backed by Bitcoin, and, you know, some of us look at Bitcoin as a godsend, a 24/7, 365 liquid equity layer asset, but other people look at it as a risk on tech stock, right? They don't even want you to borrow against it on margin. So that dynamic of the understanding within the marketplace has led to MicroStrategy getting a very low credit rating, which then transfers over to their products and then makes those products ineligible to some of the biggest fixed income buyers in the marketplace. And what he's doing by adding cash to his balance sheet is that he is extending the runway before he needs to touch the Bitcoin. And cash being looked at as more of a pristine collateral, or even a cash equivalent, a more pristine collateral than Bitcoin, that reduces risk to the preferred's issuance and their liabilities. And then with the reduced risk, he's hoping to get a higher credit rating, which will eventually open up the door to the bigger fixed income buyers in the marketplace versus the pool of capital that he's almost, I would say, is pretty close to tapping out at this point.
I mean, it's wild to me how divergent, how divergent realities can be, which is right. Like on one hand, we have people who came into Bitcoin because the US dollar is the opposite of pristine collateral, right? It's literally a shit coin that they didn't revoke mint authority. It's like, I will print whenever I want. The same goes too, right, on the whole divergent reality thing. One of the things I love about being in Bitcoin and crypto more broadly is that people still believe in ownership and some of the underlying principles, right? The compliance to death thing drives me crazy because it's like, do we want this to become like everything else? But we also have, especially on the terms of real estate, we have Donald Trump talking about 50-year mortgages, which essentially makes you a permanent renter with like the flowery language of ownership and building equity and giving you some of it. But a 50-year mortgage feels like a way to create exit liquidity for a housing market that is overinflated, in my opinion.
Boom. Very well said. I was just about to bring up, I did a tweet yesterday. Basically, Trump answered a question from the press. And in essence, his answer was, if we build more housing, the price of homes will go down and homeowners will lose their wealth. So it's exactly that. Rather than actually, allowing young people to own homes, which would be allowing the market to correct itself naturally, i.e. building more properties than what we have currently. We currently face a huge shortfall of housing in the United States. We're creating these 50-year mortgages, which will allow for people who have lower incomes or lower total asset bases to qualify for a mortgage. So they can purchase those homes from boomers and older folks where the home is a large percentage of their net worth. On average, across the country, the typical homeowner has about 55 to 60% of their total net worth tied up in their primary residence. And so it's a tough needle to thread, but ultimately the solutions that are being presented now, like the 50-year mortgage, don't actually solve for this affordability crisis. It's this veneer of homeownership over a reality of permanent renting. The 50-year mortgage doesn't solve the homeownership problem. If somebody wanted to enter into a 50-year mortgage and sell after 10 years, they'd have barely, if any, equity built up over that time frame because of the amount of front loading on interest payments that happens. So it's an interesting conundrum that we find ourselves in our country, and it all gets tied back to detaching money from physical reality in 1971, and homes have basically turned into de facto stores of value as a result. If you take a look at the replacement cost of a home, or if you adjust home prices today to adjust for CPI and inflation, and also you make size adjustments, anywhere from 30 to 50% of home values in the United States today are pure monetary premium. That's value that's hot air. It's value that's not in the bricks and mortar and the wood that was used to build the home. So we find ourselves in this conundrum where, because homes make up such a high percentage of the typical American's portfolio, the solution to raise housing affordability cannot come at the expense of home prices. And so we find ourselves at a really interesting spot in our country. How are we going to resolve this? I have no idea. Do we allow home prices to crash? I don't think so, because they're a politically protected asset class. But I think that's a good thing to talk about now on the panel to get your guys' thoughts on this. Like, how on earth do home prices resolve? Do they come back down to earth? Do they stay exactly where they are now and keep chugging along at 3 to 5% a year? How does this resolve? And if home prices stay where they are, who's going to buy them?
I love. Go ahead.
Well, I'll pitch in on that. Dana and I worked on a project in Sedona, Arizona, for this really super healthy house, concept. And after she and I got to know each other, I had put an idea into the developer's mind to develop communities based on affordability and amenities, right? So if you could build, better, more resilient, more affordable. And a lot of this problem comes down to land zoning, right? Which is the biggest problem in the United States, is zoning for not small houses, right? You can't get any city or county to change their zoning for anything. And it's, as an architect, it's something that's frustrated me for 30 years, and it still isn't resolved. So you have to basically go out in the desert, buy 40 acres, create amenity like hyperbaric chambers, swimming pools, spas, healthy homes, include everything in it, make your own power, and then basically you can create affordability. And that's what that's one of my goals here with my development. Once I make some money with this project in the Bahamas, I'm going to do one hopefully in the desert and do this concept, because I think with Dana and some other consultants I have, we can achieve affordability and resilience and reduce their cost of living, right? If power, water, sewer, and everything is included in their mortgage, I mean, those things are all adding up, especially energy prices, et cetera. So I think, I'm on that pace to hopefully solve this problem, at least start it. I'm not going to finish it, but at least I want to, do something that will be a legacy for the housing industry, because it is a difficult problem.
Well, Elon says, don't worry, you don't need to save. We're going to get universal high income, you guys. And
abundance.
Yeah.
Your mortgage.
You want me to ring in on this? Because I'll ring it in. Right?
Yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
You guys have really good intentions for the world. I'm very proud of you all, right?
Yeah.
But
Thank you, Gary.
you're right. And listen, I'm not saying you can't do it in Arizona or in the Bahamas on a micro level, but you think you're buying a house in this country? Nah. You're buying into a system that billionaires already own, folks. That's what you're doing. And I love all these little pet projects. And yeah, one of them may make it out and do well or save a small community of 100 folks. But and I've been debating this with my friends and my peers and things like that, but there's a much bigger play going on here. And I always say billionaires signal, right? They don't care about affordable housing, right? We don't have affordable housing. They don't care about immigration. They don't care about this. They don't have that. Politicians and billionaires work behind closed doors. So I would love your feedback on what I see that's happening, right? So first of all, now Bitcoin is in control by Wall Street for the majority, except for a couple of last players, right? And the billionaires. Number two, what's the largest asset outside of Bitcoin and everything in the world that's in control by billionaires? Real estate. Okay. What is the worst thing that they control? Fiat currencies, the dollar, right? Constant inflation going down. I see a setup that's happening, right? So let's bring up Elon Musk. Elon Musk was a great guy to get Trump elected, right? Doge, this whole thing about cutting the budget and balancing the budget. Sure. That was never the intention. The intention is you get a guy like Musk going, hey, they're spending $400 million on transvestites in Africa. That's what gets him elected. Then what happened? They went to war. They hated each other. They threw out Doge. And what did Musk get? Musk got, autonomous vehicles. The Department of Transportation passed it. Stock doubled in price. Now look where Tesla is breaking highs. This is where the billionaires play. Now let's address the mortgages, right? Now you got Liberty Financial. If I don't know any names or wrongs, tell me. I'm ADD, right? You got the Trump kits, the Witkoffs, all the billionaires playing where? Real estate and now Bitcoin, right? They're building the rails of decentralized finance. They took it away from BitBoy, all of that stuff. So what's going on? Now they launched their own stable coin, right? I think Dubai gave them $2 billion and they bought treasury bills. And again, let me know if I'm wrong on any of my facts, but I see this whole thing playing out by billionaires. Now, I do a 50-year mortgage. What does a 50-year mortgage do? Just in theoretically, right? I have a $300,000 house in America, right? Now my payment is $3,000 a month. Theoretically, I'm increasing it by 66%, 30 years to a 50-year mortgage. What did I do? I lowered the price of the mortgage to $1,000, right? Versus $3,000 to buy that house. There's affordability. Bullshit. What's going to happen to the price of housing, right? If you drop the payments by 66%, when there's a 20 million plus shorting of houses in this country and homeless people and all that stuff, you're going to send real estate through the roof. You're devaluating the dollar massively, not by 66%. It'll take time, over 2 to 3 years. Now he's talking 15-year car notes, all of that stuff. There's no resetting the debt system, boys and girls. That's what Musk and Trump, they figured that out a long time ago. They're just going to kick the can 20 years down the road. But the billionaires are in what? Real estate, Bitcoin, gold, oil, all of that stuff. So you take on a 50-year mortgage, real estate's going to go up minimum 20, 30, 40, 50%. Think about this. Let's say you're living in Minnesota and your house is $300,000 and you got $150,000 in equity. Now I had a 30-year mortgage. Now I'm going to cash out, refi, tap that equity, consumer spending, everything. What you're doing at the macro picture is you're devaluating the dollar by like massive amounts. And what are they all buying today? Bitcoin, right? Real estate, hard assets. Hard assets always appreciate. Bitcoin is the new digital gold. That's why I love real estate. That's why I love Bitcoin. And that's why I came on here today. So I see this kind of playing out, and I would love your guys' feedback, because I look for the next 10 years signal, right? And I see the billionaires are stacking it.
I think if we talk about politically protected asset classes, Jerry, we saw very clear as day that in 2008, real estate had become a politically protected asset class with their response. They could have allowed the banks to fail. They could have allowed home prices to crater even more than they did, but they didn't. They jumped in with massive QE. And if I was to look at another potentially politically protected asset class, particularly with Trump's now involved in it, one thing I would certainly look at is Bitcoin, particularly with how entrenched it is in the average portfolio, especially for young people. One of the things that doesn't get talked about a lot, and I think everybody on this show knows about it, is the Fed put. This idea that when the stock market falls by a certain percentage, the Fed steps in one way or another in order to make sure that stock prices continue rising. I think Bitcoin is more and more, as the years tick on and more people own it, is taking on that exact same role and becoming an increasingly politically protected asset class. You layer on top of that the fact that BlackRock owns over 700,000 Bitcoin now. I think it's 727. Fidelity owns 121,000 Bitcoin. Now that Wall Street is very much in on it, and the Trump family is in on it, it's hard not to see, right? And the amount of that it takes up in typical American's portfolio, especially for younger folks. And I think Bitcoin is now the beneficiary of that exact same Fed put that previously only homes and equities were a part of. You layer on top of that Bitcoin's absolute scarcity. And I tend to think over the next decade, the best performing asset classes, I agree with you, Jerry, will be Bitcoin and real estate.
What do you think about the 50-year mortgage and dilution, the billionaires causing these things, and how politics really work?
As far as a 50-year mortgage goes, I think it's a temporary solution to a major problem we're facing in this country. I think the reason we're getting it is very revealing. Just like you mentioned, Dustin, it's a measure to get exit liquidity for existing homeowners rather than actually increasing affordability. It's just another measure for the banks to make money and kind of wax money out of young people. It's just renting under a different name, right? Really, that's as far as my opinion goes on it.
Yeah, the other thing about the 50-year mortgage, and I see a lot of people, and Jerry, I loved your math that you broke it down so people could easily understand the gimmick behind it. But as an underwriter, I've seen things on social media where it's like 30-year mortgage, $3,000, 50-year mortgage, $1,000, because they're using the same interest rate. But no underwriter is going to take on that 66% increase in duration risk at the same cost of risk. So the interest rate is going to go up. I'm not sure how much of a affordability factor the 50-year mortgage can even play, because you're almost doubling the duration, and the lender needs to be compensated for that duration, or else the real rate is going to be extremely negative with the amount of dilution that they're doing. And Joe, I loved your points about the politically protected asset classes. Yeah. I mean, when 50 to 60% of the everyday person has, or the everyday person has 50, 60% of their net worth in their real estate property, they're not going to vote for the sitting president or the sitting party or controlling party when they watch their net worth deteriorate. And then from the stock side of things, they're supporting stocks because that's tax receipts. I don't know the exact numbers, but I know that stocks contribute a massive amount to the tax receipts that we do have, which help offset a little bit, at least, the massive deficit spending that we're doing. And I think the role that Bitcoin plays in the future in the younger generations being part of the portfolio is that I see Bitcoin, because I look at it as a pristine collateral, I see it as like the only solution to lowering the cost of capital. So at People's Reserve, we dual collateralize property title with Bitcoin, and we do that to eliminate price volatility-based liquidation risk in the Bitcoin. But we also do that to reduce risk. So Bitcoin is really, it can be used as a risk reducing component to any type of loan. And by adding that additional form of collateral, you can, by reducing risk, reduce the cost of capital. And that is the only way, by reducing risk, to sustainably lower interest rates. I don't care what the central bankers want to do by stating rates. They're not going to be able to control the yield curve. And just look, they've been lowering rates. The yield curve is flat. And the question I'd like to pose to the board is, I'd like to get your view on this, especially you, Jerry. Do you think if gold and silver did not see the influx of liquidity that it has over the past year, that the long end of the US Treasury curve would be flat right now? Because I believe it would be deeply inverted. I mean, I believe it would be one of the steepest inversions we have ever seen, which would be the billionaires signaling to the marketplace, we anticipate much lower interest rates. But instead of front running the Fed, who is very clearly going to lower interest rates, this might be the most obvious trade in the history of finance. The president's calling for lower rates. The administration's calling for lower rates. Powell gets replaced in May of next year. Rates are going to go lower. Why aren't billionaires front running the Fed on the long end of the yield curve to lock in a capital gain of reducing interest rates? Because they know in the background something is happening, and that is the fiscal dominance that we see, the forced deficit spending of the US government, diluting the purchasing power of dollars to the extent that they're not even going to go into the dollars. They'd rather be in the gold. They'd rather be in the silver. They'd rather buy real estate before they create exit liquidity. And all of that liquidity is going into not US treasuries, which is then not sending the signal that the Fed is usually looking for, which is that inverted yield curve. What are your thoughts on that?
So, Jerry, you're muted.
Go ahead if someone wants to respond. And you know what? There's a lot of audience here, right? I would ask the question where everyone can understand, right? I get what you understand, but no one here, not everyone knows what an inverted yield curve and stuff like that. But like, if you want me to kind of break it down where people can understand, right? Because I thought about this, right? You're bringing down interest rates and you're talking about going to a 50-year mortgage and all these kind of things, and portable mortgages, right? So both have the same effect on the dollar, right? Which is destroy it. Right? That's what's going to happen to fiat currency and things like that. And you're right. When you look at the traditional signals of the bond markets and things like that, that's why, like, if you look at my Instagram on Jerry Katz CEO, I was like, I'm trying to wrap my head around this, right? But here's the big picture, I guess, for the folks out there is the billionaires, who I always say are in control, and they're always signaling everything, and they're in control of the Fed and closed doors and you know, T-bills and taxation. And by the way, for those people that don't understand how the country makes money, it's taxation, right? So revenue and taxation. So taxes go up. That's how the U.S., you know, makes more money, or they print debt just like a company and things like that. But the way I look at this is like billionaires, you know, they don't use debt the way broke people do, right? And that's what I want them to understand, right? We're not financing Toyotas or things like that. They're financing empires, right? People get into debt, stress, right? They get into debt and they scale. So if you, the point is billionaires don't pay taxes, right? They use debt as a weapon, where broke people use it and credit cards and to buy things. So that's what he's talking about. And he's seeing a play on how you bring interest rates down, which makes debt more affordable. You extend debt with a 50-year mortgage, which makes the billionaires have more weapons to use. And you extend the U.S. economy, the U.S. debt, and everything. Who loses, and if I'm wrong about what I'm saying, let me know, is 99% of the country, right? The middle class, who's going to get into more debt, overextend their houses, their mortgages. But the traditional Wall Street signals of T-bills and curves, they're not working. But what you're doing is you're kicking the world of debt, the economy, and the sustainability of the U.S. government down the road in order to sustain all the debt and keep using it as a weapon by billionaires, right? Like, to give you an example for the people, Elon Musk is the richest guy in the world, or one of them, or whatever. He doesn't pay taxes. Why? Because it's all in his stock. He parks his stock at Goldman Sachs and then borrows against it at 4 or 5%, the broker's call rate. They never pay tax. So this is all at a high macro level of what's going on. And that's what I like people who are listening to understand, right? Just remember, the rich use debt as a weapon and never pay taxes, and we live in debt. Everything is debt. Don't over leverage. What people out there, if they create crazy debt and lower interest rates and 50-year mortgages and portable mortgages, they're just doing it to trap you into the debt, because your debt finances their pockets and the world's economy. So just if you want to switch from middle class to the wealthy, use Desk Smart. Does that sum it up for layman's terms?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good summary. If I had to make it in one simple statement, I would say it this way: has the U.S. Treasury lost the ability to raise interest rates in order to strengthen the dollar and create demand on treasuries? And if so, what does that mean for the everyday person? And what type of assets should they be buying in preparation for the loss, for the recognition of a market-wide recognition of the loss of the treasury to use
100%.
interest rates to defend its
Love
currency?
that. It can't keep interest rates high. There's so much. So that's why if Trump couldn't get a hold of the Fed, that's why he created a 50-year mortgage, right? Because it can do the same thing, kick debt down the road. We may even see a 50-year T-bill, right? But I agree with you. It's not sustainable. So they're patching this all up. And what's going to go through the roof? Assets, right? Not fiat currencies. And if you see what the billionaires are doing, they're accumulating Bitcoin, right? They're accumulating real estate. They're accumulating real assets. And it's not going to look like hyperinflation, though, like it does in Mexico, right? It's going to look like the government is doing whatever they can to help out American people, right? And create 50-year mortgages and lower the interest rate and make housing more affordable. Meanwhile, the dollar is going to Bitcoin is going to go through the roof, and the billionaires make a fortune, and the people who follow them, right? So that's kind of what I see happening over the next 5, 7, and 10 years. And Dustin, you're going to be rich. Gary's going to be rich. Grant, and all of you guys are rich because you're going to be in Bitcoin because it's their new sandbox.
Yeah. I have.
When's it going through the roof, Jerry? When's that going to happen?
I don't know. MM Crypto says if we break 81,000, which could happen, I think they're trying to take Sailor out. I don't know why, guys.
What about strategy?
To that point initially about taking Sailor out, I want to add something.
All
if
right.
Strategy only has about $8 billion worth of debt, the Bitcoin that they hold at 88 grand is currently several multiples of that. It's 62 billion, something like that. And so in order to get down to a liquidation price on the Bitcoin where they would potentially be threatened, Bitcoin would need to be $12,000. I don't necessarily think that they want to do that or are going to do that. So they have the balance sheet strength to withstand basically everything. And they're currently working on paying down the convertible debt that they have. So I don't necessarily think they're taking Sailor out. I think if anything, they're trying to block him from joining the S&P 500. That's one major thing. And per your comment earlier, Jerry, about, not you, Jerry, about the US dollar reserve that they're establishing, that's just a measure in order to try and get included in the S&P 500. That was one of the reasons that this shadowy committee that determines what ends up in the index didn't include them in the index. So I think that's the reason for those two things. And as far as Strategy's liquidation price is concerned, it's kind of a long-held running gag in the Bitcoin community that, if Bitcoin falls below a certain level, Strategy will get liquidated. They have the balance sheet strength to weather, an 80, 85, 90% drawdown. They still have optionality after that. So I wouldn't lend too much credence to the idea of the same people who are issuing the most successful ETF launches that they've ever had, like the BlackRocks and Fidelities of the world, are the same people who are trying to suppress the Bitcoin price and make it fall in order to liquidate Sailor and bring his coins into the market. I just don't lend too much credence to that.
Yeah, I've heard his book value's different, and the market won't take a negative balance sheet. They'll delist the entire thing. So I've heard 160 to 170 on the stock price, and that's where we're approaching. But here's the thing, right? You and I can talk speculation. We don't know the balance sheet, but we can, and he can get more debt, and he can do that. Look at the price of the stock. The stock market is real. It's fact. It's not story. It goes to price a company based on what it predicts of the future or the current risks. I mean, 400 and change to 100 and whatever it was today, and Bitcoin is not falling in tandem. So something's going on, but again, I have no certainty, right? Meaning I'm always driving in the fog, and I only can play in the 10 feet in front of me.
But those of us who have been here a long time, we're not surprised that a shakeout's happening. I think the only place we take exception is that it's targeted specifically at Sailor, right? We have a lot of Bitcoin OGs that hold a bunch of Bitcoin. There's no doubt that these shakeouts, I mean, we've been through them over and over and over again. I think there's also some level of people holding on to the belief of the 4-year cycle. And so, right, I think we're getting some sell pressure from like people who have experienced and lived through and been successful with the 4-year cycle and trading on that. I tend to agree with Bukele that tax revenue is all bullshit, and really it's the money printing, which is where all of the government spending comes from. That it's just intended to make us feel like we're responsible for all the bad debt spending and decision making of the government. On this broader concept, so the 50-year mortgage, right? I think this conversation specifically about, do we have the ability to raise the interest rate anymore? And if we don't, what does that mean? Is part of this a bet that we'll be able to create demand for treasuries through the adoption of broad usage of stablecoin, right? So like we're watching the percentage of treasuries being held by stablecoins as part of the issuance and charters necessary to issue. Like, is that somehow, at least conceptually in the plan, one of the ways that they're trying to offset all of this negativity towards the dollar? Because one thing I'll say, Trump has been consistent as long as I've known him and as long as I've been following him politically. He's been consistent about being a bull for the U.S. dollar. That right, like he's either accepted it begrudgingly, or he believes that there's something to offset these other terrible things while kicking the political can down the road. So I'm curious, does that have enough of an impact to make any difference at all?
Well, look, I mean, currently, if we're talking numbers, Tether holds about 1.5% to 2% of outstanding U.S. Treasuries. So there is some credence to the idea that in allowing the proliferation of stablecoins to take place, you're creating a new structural bid for U.S. Treasuries where sovereigns may exit the picture. One thing I will say is that even though we have these fiscal issues in the United States, there are also fiscal issues that are faced by basically every single Western nation to a more acute degree. And so I don't ascribe, and the data doesn't really show this idea that nations are selling treasuries en masse. If you look at China, if you look at Russia, sure, that's absolutely true. They have sold U.S. treasuries. Russia no longer holds basically any U.S. treasuries. China has, of course, aggressively sold its treasury holdings over the last several years. I think creating great stablecoin legislation in the United States, Tether just announced a domestic stablecoin. Well, they didn't just announce it. They've been working on it over the course of the last year, and I think they're going to launch it soon. It is kind of creating a hedge, if you will, against that edge case scenario that the structural bid from treasuries that has come from other sovereigns wanes over the next several years, and you create a new structural buyer in allowing these stablecoins to proliferate in their usage. And it's kind of this interesting flywheel that feeds back into Bitcoin, because what else does Tether hold on its balance sheet? It holds Bitcoin. What is one of the biggest on-ramps to purchase spot Bitcoin? It's Tether, right? So it's this really interesting dynamic where arguably you could see a world where 5, 10, 20, 30 years out, I don't necessarily believe that this is a doom and gloom scenario that's going to come in the next 2 years or even 10 years, where people start selling U.S. treasuries en masse, the dollar loses its reserve status, et cetera. But the proliferation of stable coins, which is also one of the biggest on-ramps of Bitcoin, arguably you're creating a new feedback loop and structural buyer of U.S. treasuries that's in part enabled by Bitcoin adoption. Is really neat.
And dollar denominated debt, us being the reserve currency, is kind of our saving grace here, right? Because if you have debt, you're short dollars, so you have to hold some type of cash equivalent that if dollar starts to go the wrong way, like you look at the Dixie right now, it's right at the bottom of a 12-year channel, and if it breaks down, that's great if you have debt. But if it breaks up and we get like a COVID type event or something that creates a liquidity crisis where it doesn't matter what you own, everything's being liquidated and people are buying dollars, then that dollar denominated debt can destroy you. So the fact that these people who are short the dollar through debt need to keep cash equivalents on their balance sheet, as Joe says, most people who hold the treasuries are holding the treasury for that specific reason. Now, when I was in Miami, I was on a panel with Byron Donalds when he sat on the Financial Services Committee. These guys are talking about demand on treasuries. Like he straight up told me, you do not understand. Like, this is a main concern. This is something that we are going to address. And there is no real way to address it in the traditional manner. So the stablecoin has become kind of a saving grace, where even though you look at all stablecoin issuance right now, I think the US government spends that in like half a month or maybe in just a couple of weeks. And that's all, including all stablecoins. So it doesn't matter right now, but where they're driving this and what they want to do is, like Joe said, create that bid. And for the banks and for stablecoin issuers, it's a really good deal. I mean, think about it. If you're a bank and you're holding a cash equivalent and it is paying you 4%, and you know in the next couple of years it's going to only be paying you 2%, what's the best thing you can do? Use that cash equivalent on your balance sheet as an asset to issue a circulating stablecoin liability, and then deploy that stablecoin liability into the decentralized finance marketplace and compound your earnings. Because now, as a liquidity provider in DeFi, you're going to get 5-6% on top of the 4% that the cash equivalent is paying. So all of a sudden, a 4% treasury cash equivalent on your balance sheet, which if you think inflation is greater than 4%, the real rate of return is negative. But now you compound on top of that what you're getting through the stablecoin deployment, and now you're at 8, 9, 10% cash flow on that instrument. Well, now you're break even. So it's a really good value proposition to market makers, and it's a really good way to kind of double up the instrument and have a double deployment, creating a dual line of cash flow, which strengthens the bank's balance sheet. So I think they're learning this right now, and the politicians are learning, the bankers are learning, and it's people like Saylor and others who are going in and talking to these people, teaching these people, creating partnerships with these people. We're slowly and surely, we're building the building blocks to help them understand. But traditional finance is entrenched. And when I went for accounting and finance to school, I thought I was being taught the holy grail. Finance is the best it has ever been. You cannot make it better. Shut up, and here's the answers you need to memorize. There was no creation. There was no innovation. And unfortunately, that kind of mindset within the space, and I'm sure Jerry can testify this on Wall Street, hey, what works, works. Let's make money. And they're not going to change that mindset. And now they're seeing a new instrument enter. They're seeing a new asset class, right? When's the last time we saw an asset class like this enter the world markets? And there's being changes, but those changes take time.
Well, so it's interesting. I've been on with BitGo and Anchorage and a bunch of other stablecoin issuers. We're also seeing like the issuers trying to catch up to the demand, which is right. Like the charters are getting right, like more and more valuable, and more people are needing more ability to issue more for exactly those reasons, CJ. Which is
it's look at the value proposition of a stablecoin. If you go to the bank, you want to use the ATM. You have to pay what, 3, 4, 5% of the money you're taking out just to access your own money. And if you want to go on Sunday, no. If you want more than 10 grand cash, maybe you're going to buy a $40,000, $50,000 SUV. You better ask permission and come back next Tuesday and hope they have the cash in the vault, because it ain't there and they need to get it shipped there. I mean, it's bullshit. You're like a little babysitted little debt slave when you're using a regular bank. When you have a stable coin, you actually have a semblance of freedom. You're not free from the inflationary reality of the dollar, which the stablecoin is a derivative of, but at least you have some financial freedom in that you can move that money based on your own decisions without asking permission 24/7, 365 for fractions of a penny. And I think that alone is strong enough of a value proposition. But what I told Byron, I said, hey, man, that sounds great. Stablecoin issuers are going to buy the debt. Fantastic. But did you think about the value proposition to the marketplace? Because what you're now doing is saying, hey, do you want a bank deposit, right? Do you want a demand deposit at a bank, which is backed by maybe a penny, hopefully 10 cents? But come on, we know what's that reserve requirement after COVID? We know what the reality is. You got a penny back in your dollar in a demand deposit. You have $1 legally backing $1 in a stable coin. So not only do you get all the benefits I just stated, you don't have fractional reserve banking. You have a fully reserved banking model. And then therefore, you're now telling the marketplace to make a decision between those two things. I think if we had a bank term funding program, because people wanted to pull their money out of the banks and go to the money market funds for a few extra basis points on their savings account, when they realize the freedom that comes with a stable coin, when they realize the yield that comes with a stable coin versus a savings account, we might have to have bank term funding program V2 to make up for the flight of deposits that leave those demand deposits and move into the stable coin. It's just a better technology for the everyday person.
There's no doubt it's vastly superior, but from a political perspective, there's one thing that scares me, and it's when you say freedom, right? Which is, there's no doubt that there's better returns, there's more control, right? There's less leverage and the fractional reserve like state of how money used to work. The danger is central bank digital currencies and the ability to program it. And whether or not we have protected ourselves from programmable money, right? The example I always use when I'm concerned about this, China had an issue where they tried to give out stimulus and in order to spark economic activity. And it didn't work because the Chinese are savers and did not go out and spend it, right, on a bunch of junk like we Americans would if we get an extra couple $1,000s in the bank account. What happens if they start programming how long we're able to hold money? And right, it becomes another scary part to me, is that we start seeing this programmable money, that how long you hold it, how other things do, which is why, like, I think that the people who have led the charge on the banning central bank digital currency legislation that we've seen in Florida, we've seen in a bunch of different states, and has been pushed federally, is so important. And it's why it's one of those critical political battlefields that seems like it's in the weeds, but if we don't prevent the banning of central bank digital currency, which really means program, like the ability to pre-program the money that you own, this could become a system that's not freedom at all, and actually it's like quite the opposite.
Yeah, that's so well said. And for anybody out there who wants to support the fight against CBDCs, please look into Samuel Arms and the FBBA, the Florida Bitcoin and Blockchain Association. They do a lot of fantastic work, and he worked directly with DeSantis to get that legislation passed. And the more support they can get, the more effective they're going to be. Those guys are doers, and they are representing we the people in the places that we need to be represented, because and that's the difference between a CBDC and a stablecoin. A stablecoin has a decentralized aspect to it where, yes, it can be blocked, it can be raked, it can be pulled from your wallet upon court order, but a CBDC can be issued to you, and now you have 2 weeks to spend it. And it's going to be this overreaching economic philosophy, which we already know that, look, GDP is not 3.8% with the Fed lowering interest rates to support employment. That's impossible. That cannot happen. You cannot have 3.8% GDP and the Fed lowering interest rates to support employment. The numbers are messed up. Those numbers are not going to translate to freedom when you give them control of the money. So that is probably, Dustin, I think that the most important fight we need to fight. But Bitcoin, funny enough, as a savings technology, you look at Bitcoin as a savings technology, stablecoins as a spending technology. I want to save in Bitcoin and I want to spend in stablecoins. And then you that may give us a chance to get around that if we lose that fight, and hopefully we don't.
Right.
Yep. Hi, Samuel.
Again, go ahead, say something, but I just want to explain it to everyone else who's listening.
Yeah, you go first, then I have a question.
Okay, so Simon Sinek says this well, right? He calls it, I think, the law of diffusion of innovation, right? If you ever watch Simon Sinek on this golden circle, right? So there's different stages of the marketplace, right? So there's early adopters, right? Who are early adopters? About 2.5% of the marketplace. That's you guys, right? And even me. And we're doing things on the why, and because it's logical and because it makes sense, and we're willing to go with our gut and our intuition and our shared beliefs. At the same time, we're willing to suffer inconvenience and use cold storage and wallets and what's Web3 and all this and all that, right? So that's about 2.5% of the population. And by the way, you're maybe at 5% right now, right? Which the next stage, I think he calls it early majority. That's 13.5% of the population. This is when visionaries like this room start to adopt based on belief, right, of everything you're saying, because everything you're saying makes sense, right? I totally get it. But that person who's watching my Instagram, retweeted on this and everything, they have no idea, right? It took my mother right? I mean, God, her birthday was yesterday, 81. But the point is, it took me 15 years to literally put an iPhone in her hand, and now she's addicted to it, right? So it's the truth. So once the tipping point happens, Simon Sinek says after that, there's an early majority, which is 34% now. Okay. And then the tipping point, the mass majority. That average cycle can take 10 to 25 years, right? So most of the people that are watching us, right, on X are probably more sophisticated because X is that platform. But on YouTube, on Instagram, on my TikTok, right, they have no idea what we're saying. And until you can say, click, send, and it doesn't even say stable coin, they think they're moving fiat or something like that, none of this is going to be adopted. And that's the problem with being an early adopter is our belief systems, the logic, it all makes beautiful sense, but it may not make us a ton of money. And I can't tell you, like, I used to mentor for Sequoia startups, right? How many startups started in the dot-com age? And then after that, 10, 15 years before their time of adoption. So you better have the sustainability, right, to hang in there. And you guys have been in Bitcoin for what, 15 years plus? And we're just seeing the beginning of everything that they're saying. So for those folks out there watching, what's the easiest thing for them to do? Maybe get a Coinbase wallet, maybe buy some ETFs in Bitcoin, right? Maybe start to understand a little bit of what XRP does, what decentral finance. But, World Liberty Financial just started this year? So now the billionaires are going to play in a decentralized finance center. When's it going to go mainstream? So I just want everybody out there listening to understand you're hearing all this. It's probably a little bit over your heads, right? But it's okay. Bitcoin, we believe, is the future. We believe that if you sit in cash and in the dollar, you're losing money. Last year, about 7%, one of the gentlemen said here. So you better do something, even if it's calling Charles Schwab and buying a Bitcoin ETF if you don't own a home. And for me, that's the big message for the masses, right? And I'll leave it with that. Sorry.
Well,
It's awesome.
Yeah. So what if what do you think about strategies STRK instead of doing all this real estate?
So it's interesting. I'll chime in on this. I'm not, in the real estate industry for very long, but what I will say is a lot of anecdotes about people selling their rental properties and other investment properties to buy Bitcoin and STRK or Stride or Stretch or the other one. I can't remember exactly what it's called right now. Because you don't have to handle all of the other liabilities, the maintenance, the handling tenants, things like that. The idea that if your AC breaks, and I'm talking about people who are renting, multiple single family properties. If your AC breaks, there goes an entire year's worth of your cash flow. So a lot of anecdotes that you've seen across Twitter and in real life, people talking to me about these things, of people just deciding that rental properties as a game isn't worthwhile for them. That said, the private equity types who are purchasing up single family homes en masse, I don't necessarily know if they share the exact same view, but certainly open to hearing what other people think about this. I've heard it anecdotally. It seems like a much better way to generate yield than having to actually focus on managing multiple rental properties.
What do you think, Jerry?
I think BlackRock right now is picking through every single real estate investment trust and every stock that's down in the real estate sector. REITs are real estate investors. They're mutual funds filled with real estate, right? Different sectors, different asset classes, industrial, retail, multifamily. I think the institutions are out picking through it right now. The real estate market has been at a standstill for like 2 years, right? That's our main bread and butter here. Syndicators and underwriters, insurance. 2 years, we've seen the slowest market of deals trading. Yeah, there's always certain deals trade, but all of a sudden it's happening, right? Interest rates came down a little bit. The sellers that were at the peak of the market 24 months ago realized, hey, I'm not getting $240 a unit for multifamily on a, $3,000 or a $2,200 a month rent, right? And there's certain liquidity events happening right now. Office, right, got destroyed. It's never really coming back. There's conversions. So there's so much liquidity out there. It's unbelievable. You watch it. They're out there picking this stuff up as we speak, right? And go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, Jerry, but that just triggered. I think what you said might be the most important takeaway from the entire panel, which is we are exiting the bear market. A lot of people are confused that we are entering into a bear market. No, we entered into a bear market when the Fed started raising interest rates, and we went through the most aggressive interest rate hiking in percentage terms, right? Volcker went from 20% or 5% to 20%.
Yep, 500 basis points.
400% increase in cost of capital. But by going from 0.25 to just 1%, that's the same 400% increase in the cost of capital. But we went to 5. That's a 2,000% increase in the cost of capital. So we went through the most aggressive rate hiking campaign, demand destruction campaign in the history of US finance. We have been in the bear market. And that kind of highlights the inflationary problem that we have, because if prices reacted the way they should have, they'd be at new all-time lows, not new all-time highs. And instead, what we see are the big boys deploying their capital, like Jerry said, going through and picking through everything and deploying capital. Why? Because rates are going back down. And when rates go back down, the $7.5 trillion in money market funds, probably around 50% of that, when it can no longer be a saver, is going to turn into an investor. And when it turns into an investor, where's it going to go? Into the same asset class we all been saying, that Jerry's been saying, that the billionaires are buying now before they are no longer incentivized to be savers. They are front running a mountain of liquidity, not only from the Fed's printing machines in the form of deficit spending, but also in the form of existing liquidity parked out in money market funds, waiting to become investors again. We're going to get a second wave of inflation on asset prices, and it very well might translate to goods and services as well.
What's interesting though, right? And I'd love to hear your point, is look at the stock market in the meantime, right? And that was the joke, right? I made like 38% this year, right? And the AI stocks and the tech stocks and the Amazons, even the S&P 500. So that was the craziest thing, right? So like you said, we went through the bear market in real estate. Interest rates went up 500 basis points, like, holy shit. But yet the S&P 500, right? The NASDAQ, everything's flying through the roof. I mean, people say it's AI, it's efficiency, it's spending, it's demand, earnings growth, right? And I'm the founder of the South Florida Commercial Real Estate Forum, 10 investors for 10 years. And we're trying to do real estate deals 24 months ago. And we were saying, screw it. And we were buying Bitcoin and we were buying the stock market. And man, looking back, and that's only because really tech heavy stocks, right? And AI and everything. We were like, at one point, like, why would I buy a piece of real estate at this point? Look at the returns. But what's interesting, CJ, is we've never seen a bear market so heavy in real estate with high interest rates and everything, but a stock market that doesn't quit. So what does that mean in the next 12 months? Because we've seen a ton of liquidity come out of tech stocks, come out of all that stuff. Palantir's over this, it's 400 times earnings. This one's that. NVIDIA's, through the roof. It's the biggest company in the world. What happens next to stocks?
Yeah, I mean, I think we continue on, and the main
Really?
reason is because stocks are the number one contributor to tax receipts, and interest rates are so fragile right now that we cannot afford to have a significantly increased deficit. So the bad part is that usually government deficits expand during recessionary periods, but GDP is at 3.8%. And our deficit is expanding at the highest rate ever. I really think we're at the end of this fiat monetary experiment. Like this whole debt-based system has reached the point where to service the debts, we can no longer print the money, because before, when we printed the money, we got the corresponding growth. We're not getting the growth now. Look at the debt to GDP ratios. Look at the multiples on the stock market. They don't make any sense anymore. They are just batshit crazy. Like if you showed that to somebody from some of my mentors, if I showed them that and they were in their prime, they would look at you like, sell everything immediately and just wait. And it's like almost like the Michael Berry thing, right? But when you're in a fiscal dominant situation, you don't short the stock market with puts. You short the stock market by buying gold, silver, and hard assets.
Correct. Look at gold.
Paradigm shift. That is the paradigm shift we are watching.
Did you ever think you'd see gold from 1,000 to 4,000 in 18 months? Right? Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, we used to laugh at him. He's been talking about it since the 70s, and now the things, it's scary what's going on. There's something It's
Scary.
scary.
Scary is the right word. Scary is the correct word, Jerry. People should be. People sit on the edge of their seats to hear the interest rate. They should be on the edge of their seats right now with what gold and silver is doing. Just the other day, gold and silver made new all-time highs on the same day. Get this, first time ever in history of the world that gold and silver made new all-time highs on the same day. There's a lot of capital rotation between gold and silver based on the amount of silver it takes to buy gold. So same day highs are it never happened that way before. And it's a warning bell. People running into gold and silver, billionaires running into gold and silver and central banks running into gold and silver at the rate and pace that they are. I believe that's the liquidity that would have went into the 20-year or the 30-year and brought the yield curve down and signaled to everybody, whoa, we need to calm down here. But now we're not getting that signal. The liquidity is flowing into gold and silver. People are missing that we're going to enter another bull market in nominal terms. And they're positioning, they're carrying cash, positioning for discount prices. The discount prices are today. The premiums are tomorrow.
To give the people in the audience a sense of how insane the current run in gold and silver is, or specifically gold, in the last 5 days, it has added an entire Bitcoin market cap. And over the course of the year, it's added Bitcoin's market cap more than 10 times over. It's now a $30 trillion asset. So it's an insane run. The amount of capital that has to flow into gold in order to get the percentage movements that it has had this year is absurd. Luke Roman calls Bitcoin the world's last functioning fire alarm. I'd say that the flows that you're seeing into gold and silver are a huge warning sign about what's happening to the US dollar and the inflationary pressures that we're seeing, but also a rebalancing potentially away from US hegemony now that tariffs have kicked in. It can mean any number of things, but I think one of the biggest and most telling things potentially as we head into 2026 is investors rotating capital out of those traditionally safe haven plays and moving them into higher beta plays like equities, like Bitcoin. CJ, to your point, I think that's going to be one of the bigger catalysts for a bull market continuation in equities heading into next year and a resumption of the Bitcoin bull market heading into next year. That same capital that moved into gold and silver at the margin, flowing out and flowing into things like Bitcoin and other high beta plays.
Yeah, don't get stuck waiting for the discount that never comes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so
Jared,
what advice do you have for us then, guys?
I mean, here's how
buying on a discount.
I was
Go ahead.
look at gold and silver miners. Are they priced in properly? They're not priced in properly. The cost of production for gold and silver is low, and the rate at which they can sell in the market is extremely high. The markups are insane. I don't think the revenues have passed through the balance sheets the way the market should understand them. So one position I have on right now, and of course, this is not financial advice. This is just what I'm doing, but I'm long GDXJ, and I am long outdated calls, OTM, the furthest OTM you can get, because I don't care. I think that the revenues for gold and silver miners are mispriced, and when gold and silver stay that high, even if we get a little bit of a capital rotation, Joe, the cost of production is so low that people do not understand how profitable these companies are going to be. And it's been in such a long bear market that even though some of these companies are up 300%, 400%, 500%, they're still cheap relative to their earnings, especially when you compare it to tech, where there are no earnings and it's just the hope for future earnings versus what those people are actually earning today. That would be my one piece of advice that I'm taking right now.
Yeah, I mean, here's how I see it. I mean, and by the way, when something goes up that much, I'm the biggest seller ever, right? Because I've been through cycles and lost everything on Wall Street, right? I made $2 million before I was 30 in the tech bubble, and then when AOL went to zero, I freaking had a negative 60 margin call. But I had a condo in Manhattan with some equity. It started over, okay? So how I see it is kind of simple. If you're still asking what to buy, you're already behind, okay? This is for the masses here. What I do is I watch what the billionaires do, not what they say. I don't listen to any of the media. I have no news on my house and all that kind. I don't think they're buying stocks heavy right now. That's what I don't see. They're exiting into private equity. They're in hard assets. They're never selling real estate in core markets. They're buying more. Ken Griffith's Citadel, the largest transaction in Miami, just went off at $522 million for 4.5 blocks. Come on. Right, that just happened in Miami. It's a world record in the country for 4.5 acres, if not Florida. So they're not selling real estate. They're buying distressed debt. They're locking in generational leverage. They're creating stable coins. They're not ignoring Bitcoin. They're launching more ETFs, right? And they're paying no taxes. That's what they do. So what do I buy? I buy cash flowing real estate for control. I buy Bitcoin, I would say, for asymmetrical upside over the next decade. I think that's where the billionaires are gonna cash in without even, because of the beauty of a capitalism. They always find a new market that they can make money with and extort, whether it be digital, whether it be tulips, whether it be tech stocks, right? And that's that world, right? So I have a cash flowing insurance business. Why? Because I need the printing press going on with my AI fireworks in the background. I hold some gold as a signal of strength, not fear. And I stay away from anything that requires hope instead of map, right? Hopium and all that. So I don't think this market's going to crash. It's going to consolidate. The middle class will rent. They will always use debt, and they will stay poor. And if you want to change that, follow me on Jerry Cat CEO, because that's my whole brand, is don't be listening to all that bullshit and follow real wealth and everything, right? It's not that I need more money. It's I love impacting people that don't get how money works. What's the purpose of a business? To make money? No, it's not. It's to solve people's problems, and then the universe rewards you with money. They just don't get it. When you guys get out there and speak at FSU, University of Miami, or you go out to Minnesota and you do a conference, we forget what's out there, man. I'm just telling you. And I love people. I love God. But you know, Dustin, what the masses are like. They don't, I don't know why I don't get it. Education's where it's at, right? And we're, unfortunately, the masses are getting education from Instagram, from social media, but there are the right people to follow, right? So back to, I don't think the market's going to crash. It's going to consolidate. The middle class will rent. The top 1% will own, right? And the 0.001%, they'll own the fucking everything, the lenders, the Bitcoin. So you want to win? Don't follow the headlines. Follow the holdings. The billionaires already made their move. They always signal, and I follow them, and I suggest you do the same. And if you say you have no money to invest, don't say that, because there's always a fractional way. Play percentages, don't play amounts, right? And if you want to invest in anything, it's called an education. Don't take $500 and put it in Bitcoin thinking you're going to make a fortune. Spend $500 on one of these guys' courses. Use your skills and you'll double that income. Then eventually, when your active income becomes big enough, right, by education and skill set advancement, and making more active money, then you start investing passively and things like that. Investing passively is for rich people with exits that have capital to make enough. So that's my suggestion. Bet on yourself and buy some courses, because that's the real ROI for the masses. Thanks.
So I
Thanks,
suggest
Jerry. Always inspirational.
go full
Dustin.
on Florida man. Get yourself an Equinox 900 metal detector and go do some treasure
Go do
hunt.
some digging.
Unfortunately, you won't find any Bitcoin with that.
I've ever
You
got,
may find somebody's cold drive.
right? Go out, find that, go beep, 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 boom. Jackpot, baby. Let's go.
Do we have any other closing thoughts?
Yeah, what
Ron?
I'll say is to echo what you mentioned,
Yeah.
Jerry, you know, particularly for the middle class, particularly for the people who are listening, like invest in yourself first and foremost, and then use the fruits of that investment in order to invest passively, invest elsewhere, right? Don't buy Bitcoin thinking that it's going to be a Powerball, that it's going to go up 1,000%. Invest your time wisely and then use the proceeds of that invested time to invest in financial assets, not the other way around. There's no lottery ticket. Nobody's coming to save you. It's all on you. That can be a terrifying thing or a liberating thing. It's your choice. So that's what I'll say. But as far as concrete financial investments are concerned, I think Bitcoin's going to do well over the next year. That's what I'll say.
Don't listen to him, fam. Get a metal detector. Go get jackpot. Treasure hunters, baby.
Become a political activist.
No.
No,
like
I
being a
don't think
pioneer.
that worked out super well.
I like taking arrows.
Not
I'm
recommend.
gonna say invest in AI, in yourself and your family. I think, I've been following the trends right now, and the universities as we know it are not going to exist in the next 5 to 6 years. Unfortunately, if you either get on the AI train or you don't, you're going to be left behind big time. And just like you said, Jerry, the masses will not catch up. And the only way they're going to catch up is with abundance. which is, something that Peter Diamandis is always pushing because he thinks that AI is going to make so much money. And that's the big equation in GDP, right? If our country does, goes from 4% to 10% GDP gross, I mean, you're going to have a big difference in tax basis. And the tariffs are also going to start kicking in as these industrializations happen in the next 5 years between data centers and manufacturing of 3D printed items. Those are all automated by robotics. So those are huge investments now you should be looking at. And if you find a tech stock that's in robotics or AI, to me, that's the future of everything. So we need to look at that as definitely the way to go. So he agrees. Good. Gary.
Thank you, Ron. What about you, CJ? Do you have any closing thoughts?
I did see this really cool thing. It's like, I think it's unusual whale alerts, and they let you just copy trade the politicians. So that is for sure.
That's a great idea.
Early whales.
There's an app for that, Autopilot, I believe it's called. I think the Nancy Pelosi fund is up like 300% this year.
Yeah. So
Are you talking about on X, CJ?
yeah.
Because I follow that account, but I didn't realize that's what it
The
was.
Pelosi coin.
They gave me a example. It was like Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She invested in a silver mining production company called Helpta or something like that, like 2 months ago. It's up 400%. So if you don't know how to analyze the markets and you're still in the middle of your investment in yourself and learning, but you still have some free cash flow, you want to take a little bit of risk. I mean, we're all forced out on the risk curve because of deficit spending and inflationary pressures. Copy trade the politicians.
Who here still believes there's a difference between Democrats and Republicans? Did you hear what you just said about Nancy Pelosi? They're all in the same back room, folks.
Yeah.
I know it's easy.
But she's losing her inside access. You gotta go with Eye Patch McCain.
Right.
I
I like to say I'm red, but I
Wanna buy
think they're
her
in the
course.
same room, right? I think Obama just moved to London, right? Something's coming there.
But Dana, Merry Christmas. What wonderful.
Yeah, Merry
you,
Christmas, you
Dana.
guys.
Look,
was
look,
Thanks
fun.
so much for coming. Everyone follow everybody
Thanks,
on here. They're all
everybody.
super
I will.
smart.
yeah,
Thank
no,
you so much for everybody. I really enjoyed it.
thank you guys.
Enjoy
Yeah,
it.
every
Send
Tuesday.
selling to the Cardone
Bye.
family. Peace.
Come on debates every Tuesday. See you guys next week. Thanks, guys,
Take
for
it easy,
coming.
guys.
Merry Christmas.
Loved it.
Time for a drink.
Awesome, guys. It's a
Merry
pleasure.
Christmas.
Bye. Merry Christmas.